speed of light and revolve it in 3 dimensions, we create a cup within a cup, which is the Holy Grail. It has no inside or outside. It solves the problem of separateness. It's how self-embedding happens in the blood, the sangreal, the song in the blood, and it can hold an infinite amount of spin, which is an infinite amount of memory or pattern. It holds the Sufi heart with wings, the feminine reproductive organs, and you could zoom in forever and always see the same thing. Heart within heart, grail within grail, perfect self-embedding, perfect self-awareness, perfect fractal nesting.
In this section, we're going to talk about how embedding in a fractal and the possibility of zooming in towards center infinitely, as it were, is the same thing as the charge density we feel as bliss. So the very heart nature of compassion, as this ability to kind of turn inside out, where a wave can focus inward infinitely, is the model for how it is that we get charge density, or braiding, or eventually we're going to call it implosion, right in the DNA. This section of our story will deal with a summary, more sort of defense of the hypothesis that bliss is the purpose of DNA, because this is what puts charge density in our genetic material. We're going to suggest the hypothesis here that when the genetic material braids in this way, there's something that goes faster than the speed of light up through the center of the DNA, and this superluminal kind of wormhole may well be a very useful beginning of a description of what it is to become ensouled. It may have to do with what is able to lucid dream, because traveling faster than the speed of light also is how you really move in and out of time. And we're even going to discuss how this relates to what survives death in the bardo. So this discipline and hygiene for what's put spin in the genetic material may be a very important key and clue to really the survival of genetic memory of our species. This is going to lead us in this conversation to some pretty controversial topics having to do with even some discussion and literature review of probable extraterrestrial origins of our DNA. We're going to discuss a little bit about what it may have meant when they say the Nephilim were the fallen ones, and what descent means genetically in terms of ability to keep this fire in the genetic material. What's really sort of self-empowering about this conversation is the notion that ultimately, if we're right, is that if you lose the ability to self-steer or self-implode in your heart, it's that electrical implosion which is ultimately responsible for creating the braid in your genetic material that then makes the genetic material what I call a good squirt gun. So now we're going to play with a couple of pictures to help us visualize just exactly what we're talking about. The first one I call the Georgie Doxy spins, based on the book Georgie Doxy's Power of Limits. And so in that movie we noticed that when waves coming to this point right here appear to come to a head, do you see how these waves appear to come to a head? And yet the ratio of the lengths of these waves is 0.618 here, 1.0, 1.618, 2.618. So where all the waves converge at one point and phase lock may well be a place where their wavelength and their wave velocities add and multiply. So that may be a way to understand how the speed of the wave fronts is pushed through the speed of light in DNA. Because remember, as we played in this animation the other day, when we took the dodecahedron and we ratcheted it down, and we saw the double helix there, and then we began to braid the braid, short wave, longer wave, and we began to see an envelope forming right in the genetic material, that ultimately what happens is you get a wave. Oops, let's go back there again. Let's not lose our place here. There we go. It stopped? Okay. You get a wave on a wave on a wave, where the place where they all come to focus or agree, there is interaction between the phases of the wave. So here you have the short wave, and here you have a longer wave yet. And in the nature of the genetic material, there's the possibility where the waves cross and make that X, where they all come to that one point. They add and multiply the speed of the front wave. We call that the magnetic X, and I'm going to play you just one more picture of that sort of magnetic X story. How is the radiance of your magnetic X? Remember that here's the braiding going down the DNA, and then you get that X formation, and then because of the nature of that X formation, at the cross point, you get this improved squirt gun where the harmonics coming out the X actually appear to probably go through the speed of light. So this is where we left off in our first part of the conversation, which was about, golly, it is probable that something superluminal is happening in the genetic material. A friend of mine named William Pensinger in Santa Fe has made measures of genetic material conducting signals faster than the speed of light. It's not unlike measures that have been done in monofilaments of gold, where if you take gold in a monofilament and you send high amperage through it, at the moment of crystallization, when it changes from a liquid whisker to a crystallized skinny piece of wire, as it were, that at that moment the gold monofilament can be measured to send magnetic signals not only superconductively, that electrical resistance appears to go to zero. This is documented rather extensively in the literature, but also that the wave velocity, the propagation velocities, begin to become faster than the speed of light. And interestingly, there's even some suggestion that you can take the end of a gold monofilament and weld it to the end of a DNA monofilament and measure that faster than light ability. And so obviously we have to ask geometrically, what is the source of this phenomena where the genetic material appears to have very special electrical capabilities to send signals faster than the speed of light, and as it were, with no resistance. And so for that, we're going to look at some models of what I call Creation Mechanics 101. And what I want to start with is a picture from the literature by this Professor Moon at the University of Chicago, where he was modeling the electron shell and the nuclear geometrics as platonic solids. And he specifically showed that palladium here, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but the palladium atom here is clearly dodecahedral. Remember in our little animation that if we stellate the dodecahedron, let's go here to the greater maze, that if we stellate the dodecahedron, here's a dodeca, icasa, and an outer dodecahedron. This stellation of the dodeca, icasa, dodeca is such that we have this edge length ratio 0.618, and then the stellation is 1.0, the icasa 1.618, and this stellation, again, edge straight out, is 2.618. So you have this perfect embedding, which is simply a crisscross of all waves based on golden mean ratio, so they can all add and multiply. This is the geometry of DNA, Earth grid, and zodiac, we believe, perfect embedding, and may relate to the City of Revelation models, the foundation stone of theosophy. And yet, it's simply a model of perfect implosion. So, in the discussions about how the genetic material may, in fact, create something superluminal, this three-dimensional shape, dodecahedron, in two dimensions it would look like Betsy Ross's drawing of stars within stars. It's the pentagonal star. And in that symmetry, the adding and multiplying of waves going to center can constructively interfere infinitely. And that's, we believe, the model of perfect compression, perfect implosion. So here we have a top-down view of DNA again, and we see that it's comprised essentially of this spinning dodecahedron, which has ratcheted down a helix. And again, we look at the pentagonal rungs of that ladder, and we're going to try to visualize a little bit more clearly how this is the key to the perfect compression. So now we're looking down the zipper at the center of DNA, what light might feel like being accelerated through the speed of light because of that braiding. And the particular suggestion we'd like to make here, which is rather dramatic, is that there